Effective speakers and advocates need to know their audience in order to make an impact. But how can you do that? How can you go about figuring out who your audience is, the situation that they're in, and what you need to do in order to address them? Remember, in order to convince somebody, you need to understand them, their needs, their situation, and how you can respond effectively in that situation. Fortunately, there is a tool that we can use to help us understand our audience more deeply and our context. And in this video, we're going to cover that tool. It was originally called the rhetorical situation, and it was crafted by someone named Lloyd Bitzer. But throughout this lecture, I'll refer to it as the speaking situation. So let's start with the basics. Lloyd Bitzer believed that communication and public speaking was situational, that we speak and we communicate when we are responding to something that is going on in our lives. Something isn't quite right. We want to fix something. We want to address something. And so we communicate for specific reasons in specific places at specific times for certain reasons, and thus to communicate well, you need to understand your situation. For example, let's imagine that there's a hurricane approaching a state and one of the state officials wanted to respond to that particular situation. In order to do a good job, that official is going to need to think of all of the different components of that situation. Who is my audience? What is my objective? What are some of the things that are going to make it easier or more difficult for me to complete that objective or that thing that I want to do at the end of my speech? And by using the concept of the speaking situation, that official or that speaker could help understand all of those parts, all of those likely moving parts of their particular situation. So let's dive into it. There are 4 parts of the speaking situation: the exigence, the audience, the opportunities or constraints, and finally the speaker or the speech itself. So let's start with the exigence. According to Lloyd Bitzer, the exigence is a problem or issue that is happening that can be addressed through our communication. So think of that approaching hurricane. The hurricane itself is not the exigence because we can't communicate to the hurricane in any way to fix the situation. Instead, there's likely a lot of other small things that are happening in our surroundings that we can address through communication. If people are feeling uncertain, you can resolve that uncertainty by communicating with them and telling them a plan of action. If people are afraid, you maybe can help ease that fear in some shape, way, or form. If people are not persuaded to evacuate, you might develop an appeal that convinces them to evacuate. And so in that situation, we have exigencies. We have the exigency of people being uncertain or afraid. We have the exigency of people being unpersuaded. And so as we start to map out our speaking situation, we are looking for these imperfections, these problems, these issues that we can fix through our communication. The second part of the speaking situation is the audience. Now, Bitzer had a very specific definition of audience. When we are speaking, we should be thinking of our audience as the people who are persuadable, so that's the first component, persuadable, and also agents of change, so that's the second component, agents of change. Let's start with the people who are persuadable. Bitzer recognized that in any given situation, there are going to be people who are just not going to listen. They're not going to be persuaded no matter what you say. You could scream your head off, and they're still not going to budge. And so imagine this hurricane situation. There might be some people who are just like, I'm going to stay in my home no matter what. I've been through 10 hurricanes before. Nothing you can say is going to get me to leave or follow the evacuation order. And so for Bitzer, you would not consider those people as a part of your audience because they're not willing to do the thing that the speaker is seeking. And so we're not going to think about how we can convince people who are unpersuadable. Instead, we're going to focus our energy on trying to persuade the people who actually will listen and actually might do something given the persuasive message that we have created. The second part of that then is the agents of change. For Bitzer, we also want to consider the people who are actually able to do what we seek when we are trying to craft our speech. There are some people in situations that just cannot do what you are asking them to do. For example, if a politician or political leader is asking for someone to vote for them, people who are not able to vote, right, people who are under the age, people who have lost their ability to vote because they have been incarcerated, those folks would not then be considered a part of the audience for that politician because they can't do the action being sought, which is to vote. In our hurricane situation, right, if there's an evacuation order and the political leader is trying to give a speech on convincing you to follow that evacuation order, a 2-year-old is not a part of the audience because that 2-year-old can't follow the evacuation order by themselves. They can't get up, drive a car, And so they would not be considered a part of the audience, according to Bitzer. And that brings us to the third component, which is our opportunities or constraints. Now, constraints or opportunities are anything in the situation that is making it easier or more difficult for the speaker to address the exigence. So, for example, if a speaker had really bad reputation, that's a constraint against them. People are less likely to listen to somebody or want to believe someone who has a bad reputation. It also could be that the speaker has a good reputation and maybe they just helped fix a crisis before, and that gives them a boost of credibility initially before they even start speaking, and that's an opportunity for them. If a hurricane is approaching, oftentimes time itself is a constraint. The speaker, the political leader, the governor, whoever it is, usually needs to address the situation quickly, and that might make it a little bit more difficult for them to get all the information together that they need, and there just might be a little bit more uncertainty with where the hurricane's going to hit, what the forecast is, and so that can make it a little bit harder for the speaker or the governor to address what's going on. And then, of course, finally, you have the speech or the speaker, right? In that situation of exigencies, constraints, opportunities, and an audience or many audiences, there can be more than one. The speaker steps forward, delivers their speech in hopes that they are addressing those exigencies, that they're actually remedying those problems or issues that are happening, that they're actually using their communication well to get the audience to do the act and to address the imperfection, the problem that's happening. And so for more tips about how to deliver that kind of impactful speech, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you can follow us and learn more additional public speaking and advocacy tips. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.